The Great State Capture Heist. How much do you think it cost the country? Get this, 50 billion rand. By our estimations, that could pay for nearly 800,000 first-year university students. Or it could line the pockets of the Guptas and other lowlifes in the Great State Capture project. In this week's edition, we break down how this figure was reached and how close we are to any accountability. Plus, there's what you need to know about vaccines and the third wave, plus the latest political gaffes. So, let's dive into your weekly simple news update brought to you by me, Verashni Pillay, and the rest of the Explained Occursa team. First up, our take. 50 billion rand. That's how much the Guptas family allegedly stole from South African taxpayers to carry out its elaborate and abhorrent state capture project. This is according to one estimation. The eye-watering figure was revealed at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture this week, where Paul Holden, who runs the NGO Shadow World Investigations, alongside former ANC MP Andrew Feinstein, told the Commission that with investigations still underway, this figure does not even begin to quantify the harm and loss suffered by the state. Now, you'll recognize the whole Shadow World NGO and Andrew Feinstein as the organization and people who are behind some of the investigations into the arms deal, so they're really well placed to track these kind of investigations. Now, here are some of the notable findings that they put forward before the Zondo Commission. Firstly, there's a number, 50 billion. Secondly, guess who was responsible for most of that pillage? It was, wait for it, Transnet. The same guys who are running our railway into the ground. They were responsible for at least 81%, which is about 40 billion rand of the total that was spent on state capture spending. Eskom accounted for a further 14.19%, and that was mostly related to coal supply issues. Capture seemed to follow Brian Molefe wherever he went. He was CEO of both Eskom and Transnet at some point, so a little surprise that both those entities account for most of that figure. The Free State provincial government also spent 441 million rand on Gupta contracts. Small change compared to the full number, but still quite a lot of money. And the Guptas allegedly used no fewer than 14 companies as vehicles to enable state capture. And as we all have heard already, goods and services provided by the Guptas to the state were either of really poor quality, like their coal, or were overpriced, both apparently in an attempt to drain the fiscus to their benefit. As Holden was reading out these figures, a visibly defeated Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who is chairing the commission, said, quote, "I'm just digesting," close quote. Us too, Zondo, us too, and it's giving us indigestion. Now, we did some calculations and found that 50 billion rand could pay for the tertiary education of nearly 800,000 students if the average fee, according to the latest figures, is 64,200 rand in the first year. Now, former Cabinet Minister Malusi Gigaba's estranged wife, Norma Ngoma, also delivered her final testimony this past week. There was nothing majorly new, but there was talk of Gigaba owning nearly 200 designer suits, which is just wow. The commission is finally drawing to a close and will have to conclude at the end of June. President Cyril Ramaphosa is the biggest witness left. He's set to testify in his capacity as former deputy president. The commission has been running since 2018. By December 2020, Zonda said it had spent about 800 million rand. At least this time, state money is being used for good reason. South Africa has a prized democracy, and thanks to our solid institutions like the Commission and the Concord, we can continue to build and become better. Moving on to the big story, COVID 3.0. In case you haven't noticed yet, South Africa is in the midst of a third wave. Despite our collective COVID fatigue, it's important to once again try and limit your interactions. In the past week, hospitalizations increased by 17%, and the number of positive cases also continues to rise. It's averaging about 3,000 daily results for positive COVID tests, so be safe out there. But what does this mean for us in terms of regulations? Experts have asked the government to introduce further restrictions to bring the country to lockdown level 2 from our current level 1 before things get out of control. Some of the recommendations they've made include restrictions on larger gatherings and extending the curfew, which, in case you forgot, is now between midnight and 4 a.m. when you're not allowed to leave your house. Now, the government might not take your alcohol away this time, but it will need to take serious precautions, especially because, not to get too Game of Thrones about it, but winter is coming. The virus flourishes in colder weather. Prepare for a family meeting soon, our fellow South Africans. Meanwhile, onto the vaccine rollout, those older than 60 are a little confused, as are we, about whether they can go and get their first jab of the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, even if they have not received an SMS from the Department of Health. First, they were told to register and wait patiently. Then we had to watch as others just walked in and got their shot. Well, now you or your elderly family can do the same if you qualify. According to National Health Department spokesperson Papo Maja, although it's not encouraged, you can get vaccinated even if you did not get an SMS. You just need to make sure that you are registered on the government's electronic vaccine data system first. You can then go to your nearest vaccination site and get your jab, if there's stock available on that day. Now, South Africa is rather behind on its goal to vaccinate 250,000 people a day. By week 2, we've only been able to vaccinate just over 170,000 elderly people in total. So if you know those who still have not been vaccinated, who are over the age of 60, tell them to get to a center and get their vaccination if there's stock available. We'll need to increase the rate by about 8 times to catch up. Moving on to your briefs, what is happening with Zweli Mkhize? Talking about health news, our health minister has been implicated in a tender corruption scandal to the tune of 150 million rand. The Department of Health allegedly paid this money to a company called Digital Vibes. And now this is an obscure media communications company which is owned by Mkhize's friend and longtime associate, Tahira Mather. Now, while Daily Maverick's Peter Louis Myburgh broke this news in February, this week he published even more disturbing revelations about that contract. The company was allegedly paid millions for setting up media briefings, interviews, and other public engagements at the onset of COVID-19. It's not clear why, because this is something the DOH's own communications team is responsible for. The 150 million rand was paid out in 18 tranches between January 2020 and February 2021, according to the investigation. And the company, Digital Vibes, was appointed in a closed tender program. Alarm bells all around. Now, in response, Mkhize held a press conference yesterday where he said that the contract was irregular. He's vowed to take action against those who were involved. Now, it's pretty awkward, and it's also a big knock to Mkhize's alleged presidential ambitions, as well as the impressive image he cultivated, especially in early responses to the pandemic. On to some other entertainment news. South African rapper AKA sat down for his first interview following the death of his fiancée and traditional wife, Anele Nelly Tembe. Now, remember, we told you Tembe fell to her death in mid-April, and AKA, real name Keenan Forbes, has been in the spotlight since, especially after leaked videos showed the pair had a allegedly violent and tumultuous relationship. So the hotly anticipated interview on Saturday was closely watched. Forbes discussed the events leading up to Tembe's fall from the 10th floor of a Cape Town hotel. Here are some of the main takeaways, but remember, this is his version of events and hasn't been confirmed or denied by authorities. He said that Tembe had a history of suicide attempts and mental illness and was on medication. One leaked video showed her being talked off a ledge. Forbes said that that incident happened in Durban and that she was admitted to psychiatric hospital shortly afterwards. She had often threatened to kill herself, he said, and he also said that the argument that preceded her death lasted all night. They argued through the night after having gone out, and in the early hours of the morning, she walked to the balcony, threatening to jump. Forbes said that he felt he had to remove himself from the situation to calm her down, so he called security and went to the bathroom. Sometime during this period, she jumped to her death. He also said that he cannot remember the argument that led to him breaking down a door to a room in which she was locked, an event shown in one of the leaked videos. He said he never hit her. Now, Forbes repeatedly described the relationship as passionate in reference to the extreme emotions evinced in leaked footage. Now, whether passion should be that toxic, we tend to disagree. But the interview was handled with a deft touch by local broadcaster Tembekile Nkothoto, and AKA seemed to have been well prepared, striking a convincing note of regret and innocence. The investigation into Tembe's death is ongoing. More about the man from Nkandla, former President Jacob Zuma's Stalingrad strategy related to the Armsdale trial continues, and boy, is it exhausting. He appeared at the Pietermaritzburg High Court on Wednesday as scheduled, saying he would plead not guilty to the charges of corruption, fraud, and racketeering. In Zuma's ongoing game of legal musical chairs, he is now being represented by advocate Dali Mpofu, former national chairperson of the EFF and still quite a high-profile leader of the party. Malema and others have said they have no problem with him representing their political opposition. So you can expect loads of delaying tactics, first of which is his ongoing attempt to get State Prosecutor Billy Downer to recuse himself. Now, Billy Downer has been on the case for decades. Zuma submitted a 140-page plea explanation last week, arguing that Downer is biased and should recuse himself. But it didn't come without another cause. Zuma said if his plea is accepted, then he, Jacob Zuma is entitled to be acquitted from the charges altogether. It's a long, long circus, quite frankly. I mean, he's not just pleading for this guy to recuse himself, but saying that he should be acquitted of charges altogether. It's a bit of a reach. Meanwhile, the ANC's National Working Committee this week asked the national presenter, which is a bit like the party's prosecutor, to investigate Ace Magashule, Tony Ngeni, and Carl Niehaus for supporting Zuma during his court appearances. Now, you remember the party has said that that should not happen. The NWC condemned the members' unbecoming, divisive, and defiant behavior. And on it goes in the ANC, where all kinds of drama is still ongoing around Ace Magashule's suspension, and we'll keep you up to date on that as it unfolds. On to other political news in the country. In the DA, there's some interesting things happening. Can you imagine how awkward it must have been for the Democratic Alliance when it published a statement saying it had accepted the resignation of one of its members, Phumzile van Dam, when she hadn't actually resigned from the party but had just quit her role as an MP. Van Dam had to clarify this point on Twitter, but we're wondering why the DA was so quick to say goodbye. Now, Van Dam referenced a clique of individuals as her reason for leaving Parliament. She has publicly clashed with party leader John Steenhuisen, who removed her from his cabinet and allegedly forced her into taking a sabbatical. We're as confused as you are about the official opposition's game plan as it continues to sideline black leaders. In fact, the party seems to be doubling down on appealing to a minority of the population. A song and dance routine at its virtual rally this past weekend went viral for all the wrong reasons. Afrikaans music performer Andriette Norman performed what many called a cringeworthy medley of local hits. There was Mango Groove's Dance Some More, which merged into Kurt Darren's Kom Bikkie Hier, and of course Jerusalema by Master KG. Some criticized Williams' mispronunciation of the African lyrics at the end of that hit song. The party's Federal Council chair, Helen Ziller, lashed out at critics, calling Mango Groove's YouTube version of their own song pitiful compared to the rally's performance. We have literally no words for that. Now, nevertheless, a whopping 11,000 people tuned into the DA's rally, which offered a good example of how campaigning can be conducted responsibly in a pandemic ahead of this year's local government election, and we hope other parties will follow suit. Meanwhile, former DA member and leader of his own party, Action SA, Herman Mashaba, is running for the position of Joburg mayor in the local government elections coming up later this year. Now, he was a fairly popular, albeit controversial mayor, so he has a decent shot of getting in. It'll be good for multi-party democracy, but we hope he steers clear of the dodgy deals he did with the EFF last time. On to some good solutions news. Navigating South Africa's holy roads is like playing a game, except it's zero fun. The points are made up and your car gets screwed. This is all about potholes, in case you're wondering, not the holy kind of Holy Ghost holy. Now, we're guessing insurance companies are tired of paying out for pothole-related accidents, so we think it's a real win-win for Discovery Insurance and Dial Direct to partner with the City of Johannesburg to launch the Pothole Patrol project. It kicked off 2 weeks ago and will run for at least the next 5 years to patch up all our potholes in the city. The intervention comes as the City of Joburg says it cannot afford to maintain roads because its budget is just too strained. But this makes us wonder how it's managing its finances, considering the crazy high markups it puts on things like electricity and other municipal bills. That's the gap between what it buys services for and what it sells it on to us as residents. I mean, if you look at the 2019-2020 financials, the city's reports show that it had an effective operating markup of 72%. Upon billing, the markup amounted to 101% for things like bulk water, power, sanitation, and refuse removal. Flip, bring on the local government elections already. In the meantime, yay for fewer potholes. On to some international news, restoring healthcare in India. A few weeks ago, we told you about the desperate COVID-19 situation in Delhi, India, a shortage of beds, oxygen, and other supplies, as well as the horror of makeshift cemeteries to manage so many deaths. But down south in the country, in the verdant state of Kerala, things are much better. At the onset of the virus, Kerala officials quickly moved to trace all recent travelers. Then they set up a war room in all 14 districts in the state to address India's uneven distribution of resources. These coordination centers direct patients and resources to hospitals and healthcare facilities as available. Health workers on the ground monitor infected people, then connect them with a doctor, who then decides if they should be hospitalized. Doctors contact the war rooms and an ambulance arrives to pick them up. It's a pretty efficient system, and I wish we as South Africans would copy it. But this is no surprise. Kerala as a state has a history of investing in education and healthcare and has very good outcomes compared to the rest of India on those measures. It has more than 250 hospital beds per 100,000 people, which is roughly 5 times India's average. Kerala has a population of 35 million and has more doctors per person than most states, the New York Times reported. Now that's something to inspire change. Onto your adulting 101 of the week. Eskom has warned there's a high probability of load shedding this week, so check your schedule and charge your devices. It could hit as soon as tonight. Other than that, this week we're looking at inflation, the overall increase in the price of goods and services. It's usually an indication that things are a little out of balance in the economy, and unfortunately, we as consumers are the ones paying the price. So, here's how much you're going to be paying extra for normal items on your budget. Fuel has gone up 21.4%, oils and fats are up 16%, fish is up 8%, books, newspapers, and stationery are up 8%, sugars, sweets, and desserts are up 8%, and milk, eggs, and cheese are up by 7%. Meanwhile, electricity and other fuels are up by 6.4%, and vegetables up by 6%. We suggest looking for better deals on groceries and other items so you don't get a surprise when your regular budget suddenly falls short. Finally, the Friends reunion. If you're a fan of the American sitcom Friends, get ready for the much anticipated and long-awaited Friends reunion. The episode will air tonight on HBO Max in the United States and will be available for South Africans to watch on DSTV channel 101 on Sunday, 30th May at 8 p.m. and will be available for streaming on Showmax from the 31st of May. Could we be more excited, as one of the characters apparently say? I wouldn't know, I'm not a fan and I won't be watching, but enjoy it if you do. That's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explain Koza, simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explain.koza/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from the team.